The other day, I was walking through Walmart, and a bulletin board covered with pictures caught my attention. There were pictures of children and teenagers missing faces. Have you ever just stopped and looked at them? Each face is someone's child. Some have been missing for a few months, but some for several years. I was watching TV a few weeks ago, and an Amber Alert came scrolling across the screen. Pictures and license plate numbers and descriptions of the children and suspects were given along with it. But before there were Amber Alerts, and before Walmart ever put up a bulletin board, there was a much simpler method used to notify the public about missing children. Maybe you remember it. They put pictures of missing children on the back of milk cartons. Nearly 70 people's faces were featured on the back of the carton. But the first child ever to have his picture there was 6-year-old Ethan Pass. Ethan was 6 when he disappeared on May 25th, 1979, in what is now an upscale Soho neighborhood of New York. It was the first time he had walked to the bus stop by himself, and it was only a few blocks away. But Ethan, like any 6-year-old, argued with his parents that all his friends were walking to the school bus by themselves. And his parents relented. That was the last time they ever saw him. Now, I'm sure his parents would do anything to take back their decision, and I'm sure they've regretted it time and time again. But nevertheless, they gave in. They relented, and they let him go to school that day by himself. Now, the word relented is defined as to give up, submit, or surrender. And there's a story in the Bible about a man who did just that. He gave up. He was called to be a prophet, but when God asked him to do something, he refused. He ran. God told Jonah to go to the city of Nineveh and to preach, but Jonah refused. He wanted God to punish Nineveh, not to give the city a second chance. So he got up and started running in the opposite direction. It says in Jonah 1:3, Jonah got up and went the other direction to Tarsus, running away from God. So God sent a huge storm to beat up against the boat, and the men on board were so scared they'd get lost at sea that Jonah came to them saying, "It's my fault." And they grabbed him and threw him overboard. Now, this next part has many skeptics. They say it isn't possible, but our God is in the impossible business. Jonah 1:17, the Lord provided a great fish to swallow Jonah, and Jonah was inside the fish for 3 days and 3 nights. Now, when I was little, I used to see pictures of Jonah sitting in the belly of the whale with his little campfire going, with a skillet and cooking him a fish. But I know that's not how it happened. I believe it was dark and cramped and nasty in that fish's belly, and no doubt uncomfortable. But while he was in there, Jonah had time to think, time to pray. He knew the reason he was there was because he had ran, so he prayed for forgiveness, and he made a new commitment to do whatever the Lord had asked. I'm glad our mistakes aren't final, and I'm glad God allows do-overs, because then the Bible says the Lord commanded the fish and it spit Jonah onto dry land. Now, the first time God asked Jonah to go, he ran. But now here he is asking for a second time. And he says, "Go to the city of Nineveh and proclaim to it the message I give you." This time, Jonah goes. And I believe he preached with everything in him. Instead of giving up, Jonah pushed on. Nineveh was repented and was saved. All because Jonah was relentless. Now, I believe everyone's relentless after something. Often, it seems to be the wrong things. There's a story of a man who was on his diet, but his one downfall was a good donut. And as he was on his way to work one morning, he started thinking, "Man, a donut sounds so good right now." So he said a quick prayer. "Lord, if you want me to have a donut this morning, you'll let there be a parking spot right next to the front door." And sure enough, as he circled the block for his 8th time, there was one. We can choose to be relentless for all the wrong things, like donuts. Or we can choose to do as Paul says in 1 Corinthians 9:25. They do it to get a crown that will not last, but we do it to get a crown that will last forever. Could you imagine an entire generation relentless for God? A generation that did not back down or give up, no matter what. They kept the prize before them and abandoned everything else to pursue God with everything in them. I can only imagine what we could do, what God could do through us if we were to be relentless.